Okay, so you really want to know, huh? Fine. I'm gonna start by telling you this. And this is important, so listen up. Your entire life, this one and many others, you've been a god who uses its absolute power to make yourself powerless. Entire cultures, especially this one, have all been afraid of their weaknesses, supposedly, when in reality, they've all been afraid of their power. This goes beyond the matrix of reality. This is something much deeper than that. This is eternal. This is fully realizing your consciousness. This is infinite. This is evolution. This is our divine right.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. This is the Bootsy Greencast. I almost said my old podcast from a long, long time ago, and that's okay too. That one was called Solutions, Not Revolutions. It didn't do as well, but it was a great premise. I have an awesome show. I'm really excited. We're going to go into some really uncharted territory for the show. I've never really talked about UFOs or extraterrestrials or contact. I've written some weird jokes about that kind of stuff, but I'm really excited to explore this topic. Just before we dive in, and just so you all know, just in case, you can't find this later, our friends at Content Safe are distributing it across all the weird alt platforms, places that, appreciate free speech and expression, that kind of stuff, as strange as that is. I'm going to be at the Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest in 20 days, 9 hours, 27 minutes, and 14 seconds, but who's counting? And last but not least, I want to let you guys know about the Contact at the Cabin thing that's next February in Arizona with Joe Roop and Brandon Powell and the Grimerica guys. Super duper excited about that. Going to be a lot of fun. So check that out at contactatthecabin.com/magic. Also, be sure to join my Facebook group. It is free, and I will coach you. I'll give you some coaching tips. We got goal setting and attainment hacks up in here. It's a lot of fun. Hop in there. I share funny stuff too from time to time. All right, so let's get to it. I'm really excited, super duper excited to have Michael Horn. He's an international speaker, an author, a UFO expert, a researcher. He has a really amazing story. He's worked closely with someone who has really been in close contact with extraterrestrials, and we will get into the story. Michael, thank you so very much for being on the show today. It is a pleasure to have you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. We're both in new territories now, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We absolutely are. And I think that's great. But I think, no matter what it is that our work is, it's cool to see how it overlaps because everything is truly connected. So I'm never really delved into this kind of stuff, but it is fascinating to me. I've thought about it since I was a kid. I'm a big fan of Robert Anton Wilson and the Cosmic Trigger book, where he may or may not, he talks about some pretty interesting alien sort of encounters. But let's just start from the top. You're out in Flagstaff, and you've been researching this stuff for some time. Can we talk a little bit about the genesis of that?
Sure. Like you, I, since childhood, was very interested in space and stars and what have you. I probably was having a childhood a couple decades before you were born, at least. But I was I was always interested in that stuff, and even in the early years for me, I would dream of lights in the sky that were moving. Now, I was growing up in the 40s and 50s and all that, with first early radio and then early TV with the space shows that were very primitive, little things that they pull by on strings and all. But I was always fascinated. After that part, getting into the 60s and 70s and all that, I was never that interested in sci-fi. For whatever reason, it didn't attract me the way it did a lot of people, like Star Trek, for instance. I didn't even get into that till maybe 15 years ago, looking at reruns of it. And it was in 1979 that I walked into a bookstore in LA where I was living, and I saw this photo book, and it was just sitting on a, you know, kind of a display after walking this bookstore, and there's this display with this clear photo of a UFO and an airplane on it. And I opened up the book and I saw the clearest, most remarkable UFO photos I'd ever seen. And right away, it was like something grabbed me and it's like, this is real. And that was the beginning. And of course, ever since then, I've maintained this is real, but I've had decades, 42 years in which to really delve in, research, investigate, 20 trips to Switzerland where the man who's the contactee lives and many people who help him with his work. I've made 4 or 5 documentaries on this, lectured universities internationally, all sorts of stuff. And the thing that maybe I should say in the beginning of this is unlike virtually any of the so-called UFO cases, because most of the UFO cases, people are chasing lights in the sky and, you know, grainy things from the Pentagon and this and that, and talk of aliens. And it's all kind of sci-fi, in my opinion, because I think maybe I'll just click on something here for you really quickly. This is one of a series of 9 photos that this man took of a UFO hovering in front of a tree, very deliberately posed there by the people with whom he claims to be meeting ever since he was a 5-year-old boy. The man is 84 years of age now, Billy Meyer in Switzerland. And his evidence is incomparable. It's actually still irreproducible. It's all pre-digital era. And there are, at this point, probably about 120 eyewitnesses, 5 or 6 other photographers. And that's the easy stuff. The UFO part of this is the eye candy. It's really the thing meant to attract our attention, to provoke a controversy, to get something going that is truly far more important than the UFOs, as wonderful and exceptional as UFO photos may be, and as stunningly clear as his photos are. The man took photos, let's see if I got one here, from inside the craft. He's taken photos, and this is another one. It goes on and on in terms of the UFO stuff. But nobody in all of ufology, none of whom know what the hell they're talking about, pardon me. And you know, I like to say I'm persona au gratin in the UFO community. They would cover me with cheese if they could. So I just am a little bit outspoken on this, because the man at the center of this is a very genuine human being. You notice you don't have him on because he doesn't do interviews. He's 84 years old. He's still very, very strong and vital guy, but it's not his thing. He lets other people talk about it, investigate, discover the things that are in here, because in addition to all this hundreds of clear UFO photos and films and all, the man has published probably now close to 50,000 pages of information, with a vast amount of previously unknown scientific information given to him by these human beings, allegedly, if you will, with whom he's been meeting since he's a 5-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. But the unasked question in ufology is, if the contacts are real, what's the reason for them?
Right. Right.
Everybody thinks it's about technology, because you see all this stuff. People are babbling about anti-gravity craft and UFO and time travel, everything that they know nothing about. Although there are some people, believe me, in this country and others, that know about UFO technology to a degree. But they don't know this technology, but there has been for 100 years on this planet, ostensibly, alternative craft that have been in development by other countries, including ours as well. But the reason is not to dazzle us with their footwork, so to speak, with their objects, and that's to get our attention. May we have your attention, please?
Yeah, that's the clickbait funnel, right? They're like, hey,
that's the ultimate clickbait.
That's right.
Great. I gotta
check out this intergalactic Gulf Airstream. You know what I mean? Boo, hey, do we have your attention? And then But let's talk about that. I love your perspective there. I think that's definitely worthy of unpacking. If that is the sort of dazzle to grab our, what do you think where the message is? Where do we go from here?
Well, this is the thing. And as far back as 2004, I put out my own first DVD. I call it a lecturementary, like instead of a documentary. It was like a lecture where I simply used PowerPoint. It was very simple, films, photos, all this stuff, but simple format. And I call it the Meyer Contacts, pardon me, the key to our future survival. And I mean that absolutely, literally, it is the key to our future survival. It means we have to also be able to descend into reality and to push away the phantasms and the phenomena and the fancy everything that today's readily available media and effects that you can stream into your phone, stuff that would have taken, film studios multi-hundreds of thousands in the days or millions of dollars. Here it is. So it is literally about our future survival. And within those 45, 50,000 pages of information are literally hundreds of specific examples of prophetically accurate, error-free, scientific, environmental, geopolitical, economic, and other information. As I said prior to saying that, previously unknown to us. I jumped into this, as I said, I had a photo book, and I have plenty of them around here. In 1979, the first photo book. It wasn't until several years later when I found, accidentally, I was in Sedona, Arizona. I had come for a little getaway with my daughter and some friends and met a guy in a cafe, and we got to talking, and one thing led to another, and the Billy Meyer case came up. This is 86, it's still early. And he said to me, "Do you have the contact reports?" I said, what's that? He said, "Well, in the photo book, there are those paragraphs where Billy Meyer is being talked to by these people, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I have 1,800 pages of transcripts of those conversations." I said, "Gee, how do I get them?" He says, "Well, when you get back to LA, come up to Decker Canyon, I'll give it to you." So there used to be an old form of reproduction called mimeographing. And I say that because I was so familiar with this. Everybody mimeographed back in the 70s, what have you. It was a very primitive form of, printing, multiplication of information. Nothing even remotely close to what we have today. But he had 1,800 pages. It was translated all in English. It was the conversations, this man, Billy Meyer, and these alleged extraterrestrial people speaking to him. And I happened to notice that the translations were a little difficult because whoever translated was not that fluent in English, but they were fascinating. I read and read and reread, and it took time because of you have to read backwards a little bit with people who translate from German and put the verbs at the end. And so it happens that a couple of years later, I open up a local paper in Los Angeles, and there was a new discovery, a new article. It said that Lawrence Livermore Laboratories had a new discovery, and that was that the A-bomb testing, the explosions of A-bombs, were tied into the ozone damage. And I start to read and I go, well, wait a minute. How could this be new? I know this information. And like a light bulb went off, and I reached under the bed, and the first 100 bound pages, I'm scrolling through. Oh yeah, here it is. They're telling Billy Meyer that he's got to contact this Michael McElroy, I think his name was, at Harvard, a scientist, because of the ozone damage isn't only due to these gases, but there's a big connection to the A-bomb explosions from the detonations at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and testing of A-bombs and radiation leaks. My gosh. And they give this percentage of damage to the ozone. I'm going, oh, holy cow. Here it is. It's 1988. It's a new discovery from Lawrence Livermore Laboratories, but the document in my hands, that information is from 1975. And in there, they're saying to him, as you knew previously, which I would find out he did get that information in the 50s. I mean, okay, so what happened to UFOs here? I would then realize this is about something more important than UFO photos. And in the subsequent years, continuing right to today, we find one after another, there's a new discovery, a new announcement, and we go, well, Billy Meyer already published that. So here's the thing. We have people who are experts going back 40 years up until now, photographic, military, legal. They've authenticated his evidence, his photographs and films. That's a given. And I have a little story if you want, if we get to it, it's about how I got interrogated by a guy who was a military investigator, intelligence investigator, I should say, for military intelligence. And that's a given now for anybody that can just think and go through it. But wait a minute, the higher standard of proof, and that's what I labeled it, was to find this information that this man could not have known when he published it. He couldn't, we didn't know it. There was no way. And that subsequent discoveries, when we finally getting around, our scientists, they would sometimes use the exact same terminology or dates or whatever that we're holding in our hand from decades earlier.
Wow.
That staggered me, and it still does. And depending on where we go in the conversation, when I get to something in here that we'll get to, I'm sure, before we close out,
Okay.
this will be the thing that I want people to grasp and check out for themselves.
Okay, great. Well, I love that. Let's definitely keep a pin there. I do have one question that's kind of floating up to me.
Sure.
You know, you've been studying this stuff a long time. There's been a lot of, I would say, like stigma, like around this topic for years and years and years and years. Now, all of a sudden, you know, I turn on Fox News or whatever, which I actually don't turn on, but I just know that whenever I'm on YouTube, it just automatically plays that clip. Anyway, and this disclosure is coming out now more and more. Do you have any thoughts about that? Like, why have they stuffed that away for so long, and then now all of a sudden it's mainstream news?
Sure. Well, you know, I would say this, that as this so-called disclosure thing started to happen, and I was speaking up more about it, I encountered in myself a raging frustration, because I have reached out over the past, let's say 20 years, to scientists, journalists, online, whoever you want to call it, everybody in every organization in ufology, every single one, these people are considered themselves experts in everything. Because this is authentic, it's ongoing for almost 80 years. Now, people say, well, Billy, if you ever saw the X-Files, you saw a poster that says, I want to believe. That was one of Billy Meyer's photos that the producers made an arrangement to modify slightly so they can use. A year and change ago, Sotheby's, the big auction house in New York, auctioned off less than, I think, 24 of Meyer's UFO photos, third-hand prints. And we all have these, $16,000. Now, then we hear this disclosure thing is starting to happen. So I'm reaching out to people. You have to understand, Billy Meyer has survived for his trouble nearly 24 assassination attempts, attempts of kidnapping his children, the most vile and despicable character attacks. And the man never loses his composure. He doesn't rush to his own defense. He publishes information where he says, well, no, here's what is the truth about it. People have to determine for themselves. Now, I've been on a show called Coast to Coast with George Norrie 21 times, right? He's referred to me as the world's leading authority on UFOs.
Wow.
But you haven't seen me on Tucker Carlson or any of these shows. There's a reason for it. And by the way, I'm not a conspiracist. I know there are certain things that you could call conspiracies which have basis in fact, and most of them don't. They've been just kind of crazy distortions. But here's the thing. This material is censored and suppressed from the top down. What people may not know right now is that the major networks have moved in, many of them already have had, people who formerly were at high levels of the intelligence world, CIA, et cetera, who now are the directors or on some level, CEOs, whatever, of major news organizations. They determine what will and will not be seen. Now, maybe you've seen this guy, Lou Elizondo, who's been all over the news. He's one of the big people coming out. When the Pentagon thing was first breached here, we're being told all about threat assessment. And I was jumping on that right away. I mean, I've published dozens of articles. I have over 1,300 articles on my blog alone, this case specific and all the related things. Here's the thing. These people, there's no threat from these people. They would have long ago, or from any of the other, let's say, existing races that perhaps either have some kind of a peripheral or direct presence in observing our planet. And I pointed this out long ago, had any of these, let's say that there are existing other extraterrestrials, had any of these ever had in the at least 70 years that the Pentagon now says it's been going on, a hostile thought towards us, we'd have been toast. You don't give up the element of surprise. You don't toy around with a primitive relative to their technology world. If you want to attack it, you take it over, you annihilate, whatever you're going to do. So I called this out as a very phony premise long ago. It is a phony premise. And the whole thing with this, I mentioned Lou Elizondo. This is Lou Elizondo. So I went after him too, because he published a pledge. This is a guy from the military. I will always tell the truth was number one. Number 5 was I will always push for full disclosure. So I said, Lou, tell the truth about the Billy Meyer case. He wouldn't respond. Although the interesting thing is there's a video that he and one of his friends from Naval Intelligence put out, driving in a car with me in the background, calling him out in a video, and Lou is smiling there, giving a thumbs up. This, I can go into so many aspects of the players in this and the real agendas, which are not about really, the real extraterrestrials that have been trying to help us not destroy ourselves. I don't mean just now. This goes back over 13,000 years with the people that this one man is in contact with. Again, there's nothing to believe here. This is the story according to information in the case. People can check it out. This has been going on since pre-biblical times for very, very specific reasons. And they simply cannot come down into our world and say, hey, we want to help you straighten your thing out, because with now there's literally over 9 billion people on the planet. People go nuts, it'd be chaos. And they know that their own forefathers, in many cases in the past, who did intercede in our past thousands of years ago, became the figureheads of religions that continue to these days. So it's like, no, we've got to get you people to think for yourselves. You don't think for yourselves. You follow outside leaders, real and imagined politics and religion, and that stuff is driving you to destruction and self-destruction. And unless you learn to think clearly and for yourselves and step into reality, you are going to annihilate yourselves on this planet, and we cannot prevent that. It's your free will. So there's a lot in here. This is less about UFOs and less about extraterrestrials, less about profit than it is about us, our future survival, and how to do that. But as I said, the information in this case is, we have such impeccably accurate scientific information, and it goes into those things. Look, as early as when this man was a boy of 10, he had help from his school teachers who knew about these contacts. And I know I'm kind of coming into the middle of things for an audience that may not be certainly as familiar with it as I have been. Do you ever hear of the psychologist Carl Jung?
Oh yeah, big fan. Mm-hmm. And most of the people who are watching or listening are very familiar with it.
Good. Then here's something you don't know. In Switzerland, along with a couple of Meyer's school teachers, Carl Jung assisted young Meyer to get this information out without publicly associating himself with this case, because he had very firsthand knowledge that it was real. But he also, you have to go back to 1947, he's a 10-year-old boy. This is not a time when a prominent psychologist or any people are going to come forward and say, oh yes, we know this, like I do. So the true story about the background of what Meyer even as a boy was doing and publishing at 10 years of age. He's the first to warn about unnatural climate change and global warming. He's the first person. And it started when he was a young boy because his first alleged extraterrestrial teacher gave him the lowdown on the whole thing. And this case involves genuine, otherwise inexplicable time travel, information published in the 40s and 50s and 60s that's come true specifically as foretold, including events that we are dealing with these days that Meyer even recently said, I dreaded these times because of what I was shown in 1948 would come to this world and how deadly and devastating a certain situation would be and how badly misled people would be by the authorities and the medical community and the consequences of that. So it's up to your discretion how far we go with that. But what I want people to know, in this first introduction for many people, you're going to get from the government all this, dog and pony stuff about extraterrestrials and all this crap. Some of these craft have been terrestrially engineered for a very long time.
Sure.
Some may not be. Some are from other beings, but the greatest threat we face is not from outside ourselves. We're busily destroying ourselves, swamping ourselves with our environment. In information I read it was a many multi-page thing that Meyer just spoke to one of these people, and it's all this stuff gets transcribed on the real extent of the environmental destruction. Greta Thunberg would run home to mama if she knew what she was really talking about. She doesn't, and I don't blame her, anybody for wanting to ignore. I got clued into the environmental thing in 1960s. Just one day I'm riding in a bus and I'm going, wow, the dinosaurs have come back to get us. It was my metaphor because I was watching a bus in front of me spew black smoke, and with friends of mine, I was an art student in Chicago, and when we moved to New York, a couple of guys I knew, we did a project for an animated space show for Saturday morning cartoons, Captain Tim and the Lillipollutions, a play on Lillipollutions from Gulliver's Travels. It was about this young space hero and his friends going to a cube-shaped planet in outer space that was being inundated by air pollution. And when I moved to LA and brought it to an animation house in 1970, the guy said, gee, it's really nicely done, but who cares about air pollution? I mean, it was literally the reaction. So Meyer is a boy, and he's warning about the manifestations of the increased frequency and intensity of fires, floods, storms, blizzards, earthquakes. His teacher in the 40s is telling him, and this is one that really got me recently because they published it from, I think, 47. He said, between 2015 and 2017, there are going to be these extremely powerful earthquakes in central Italy that will be the precursors to the eruptions of 5 major volcanoes in Italy. Then also the not as yet recognized existing subterranean volcanoes that ring the planet. And they're giving all this information. Well, bottom line is between 2015 and 17, those earthquakes took place. And now all 5 of those volcanoes are active.
Wow. Yeah, I'm curious. I don't want to go too far into the climate stuff. I think that's definitely worth noting. I'm sure there's a lot that we haven't explored there, but I want to try to stay on sort of topic as far as, and it does tie in, but as far as like kind of what to bring, from from Billy's experiences, what are we to do, right, with this information, and how can we, move forward and take the advice of that's being handed to us now.
I'll give you as condensed a version of my understanding of it as possible. This material that Meyer has brought forward, and I'm going to say this part of it, I like to say this a lot, according to the information in the case, because there's things I can't prove. I mean, we've proved that the case is authentic, copyrights, everything and all that, but there's certain things that are informational, I would say, from either the far distant past or the as yet unarrived future that I can't prove until it gets here or it doesn't. But this case is is centered around what's been known for a long time as the spiritual teaching or the creation energy teaching. And that is not new to exclusively to Meyer, because what we're told in this information is there have been 6 other contactees historically who worked also with this race that called themselves Pleiaren. A lot of people hear about Pleiadians. There are no Pleiadians. That's where it originated here, so that people would start to, okay. These previous contactees, some of their names are known to people. Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, who isn't known to most people, Muhammad and Meyer are said to be 7 contactee / prophets who have been working their whole lives with extraterrestrial humans who have always brought forward only this one teaching or study, which they study themselves, so that the people of Earth would understand how to learn about reality. Mm-hmm. What is life? What is this universe, this creation? What are God's, what's real, what isn't? In every case, going back to Enoch, the teaching was corrupted and falsified, turned into a religious belief.
Right.
There's, cults and sects and beliefs. And that has led, instead of to love, peace, freedom, and harmony, that's led to hundreds of millions of people being massacred in the name of love and mercy, which, of course, if we could think clearly, we go, wait a minute, there's something a little off about that. So just a tad. So once again, for the final time, in an age of electronic communication, publishing, all this stuff, the same essential teaching in the clear language we understand today is brought forward through these people and through this man for us as a study to bring ourselves into reality, to understand the nature of life, the eternal laws of the universe, cause and effect, and the fact that there is no deity or deities that are sitting around caring about individual lives, punishing us after death, dipping people in lead for eternity if they don't believe in things. We are leaving the age of beliefs for the age of truth and knowledge, and it's going to be a humdinger, because as one thing changes into the other, all of that energy, all of that which it brings for transformation is thrown up for, literally thrown up, if you will, for that transformative time when the new time comes in, when that new age, if you will, of light and reason and thinking and understanding and hopefully love and peace is birthed. But the birth pains are always very difficult. We've had thousands of years of being stuck in beliefs that have brought no peace, no freedom, no real truth. And yet every religion carries some of the truth in it, because that is what they took the true teaching and then changed it in every case to build it around saviors and saints and gods and deities and demons and things that weren't real, but have been enabled those who have that mind to control people through that, to establish and perpetuate belief systems. I personally, as much as I wasn't raised with religion, so I don't come at it from a belief, and I always wondered, and certainly in recent times, why it is with the Catholic Church that has been exposed as the hotbed of pedophilia, literally for centuries, because I learned about that one many years ago before it was exposed. How is it that people still can put a penny in the coffers? How is it that, what is the kind of control over people that they go blind and deaf and dumb, and that they got a bunch of old guys dressed up for Halloween all the time, walking around waving their hands, and they go into hypnosis. And I don't care what religion it is. Recently, we have a bookshop and we carry all these teaching. A book was published that I carry on it's called The Buddhist Deception. And it's by a guy I met in Switzerland, a Danish fellow, who, along with Meyer, brought this information that Meyer has on the origins of Buddhism and what the real teaching was. It's so different than anything that survives today. And the true history of Lamism and the abuse of women. And no, it's all the Dalai Lama smiling at everybody and Richard Gere. We fall into beliefs. But it's understandable that good people are looking for truth, and we can get sucked into things. But so the spiritual or the creation energy teaching is how to learn to think, to understand, first off, every single human being is solely responsible for themselves. There is no outside force. There is nothing and nobody outside of ourselves that is responsible for our lives. We created, but to understand that, we have to learn that everything in the universe is subject to certain immutable laws like cause and effect, and that our thinking, our thoughts create the feelings, create the thought, create the action. It's not the other way around. And when we start to learn how thinking actually works and the parts of the human being that really are unknown to us, even through our best psychology and psychiatry and all that, we get, it's like, oh my gosh, a boulder has been lifted off of the consciousness and we're free to be who we are, to learn, to stumble, to make our errors known. But there's nothing and nobody over us because the universe itself, this creation, this all-pervading intelligence and energy and consciousness doesn't intercede. It doesn't punish. It doesn't reward. It established its immutable laws. As we learn what those laws are and learn to live in harmony with them through trial and error, we experience the intention, which is that love does pervade everything. But we have got to learn that through the trial and error and through correcting our past errors individually and collectively. So there's no beliefs whatsoever. It's like you pick up a manual to study how does computers work? How do you fix a car? Well, this is what this does. That's what that, you connect that to this. If that teaching is true in that book, you don't electrocute yourself and your car will run. If this teaching is true, your life improves exponentially and the lights go on for you. And you go, well, I'm tempted to run around, tell everybody how great this is, but I think I'll shut up because I don't want to, no, I'm going to learn. And as Meyer says, people, you're not to run out and missionize and proselytize. Teach by example, learn, practice, test out that which you're teaching. And if it works, people will want to know why your life is working for you. And you can say, well, I'm studying this. So in a sense, it boils down to that because I'm reading a book that we have called Fluid. By the way, I said to you about the Buddhist deception. Look at this 700-page book. I mean, this guy's not kidding. That's Billy Meyer in the back. He's a kid guy, he's 84 years old. Guy's been through a life that, that's a conversation in itself.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, I want to have that conversation. I'm really enjoying this. Basically, what I'm picking up from you is something that really resonates with me. First and foremost, sovereignty. We are responsible for ourselves. We own ourselves and are responsible and capable for our acts that we're putting into the world, cause and effect. Living in line with natural law is so simple, right? Why is it that 95% of people can't just understand? But unconditional love, and that is the law. So I hear a lot of people say we're here to learn to manipulate energy or transmute energy or learn unconditional love. Another thing that a friend of mine says, and I have to agree with this, as counterintuitive as it kind of seems to me, if unconditional love is unconditional, then its limits, they have to be tested in order for that to be the truth. So that's kind of this weird quagmire, I think, that we find ourselves in. I don't think that everyone here, on the earth, right, is necessarily going through the same type of experience. Like you said, leading by example. And I think some people are just at different places than other people are, and that's part of our growth and our development. But I like the idea of pushing aside belief systems, not jumping into some religious sect or group or cult or whatever, just because it sounds good or even because it feels good, right? It's really about us as individuals. I absolutely love that. And I wanted to come back because you said you kind of had something to come back to earlier on in the conversation. I'd love to kind of come back to that if that's all right.
Okay, I'll just say a couple quick things about this because I'm glad we have resonance here. And what I learned about, love and unconditional love, I've said this often to people because I've had plenty of opportunity in a life that basically was pretty conflict free until I started to step forward for certain things, to encounter controversy and conflict with people. But I learned something, and it was so strange, and that is, I love everybody. I learned what that meant. Love is beyond a feeling. It's a deep understanding. I don't have to like everybody, but I can love everybody. And love, it isn't a feeling-based thing. Oh, sure, we have love, falling in love, but there's a difference. He describes a difference between affectional love and effective love. He speaks about things that we don't even know about, swinging waves, not vibrations, swinging waves. I mean, there are things in here that's like, I read this, people wake up like, my gosh, why did we never know anything about this? How things really work. So I'll come back. I want to come back to the thing I was touching on, and this is sensitive for people, but here's the thing. On February 20th of last year, I published some information because I was aware from information I had on my website for some time that as far back as 1995, and then I learned as far back as 1989, Billy Meier had published information about a lung disease that was going to come out of a bioweapons lab in Guangdong, China, and which would become an epidemic, 1995, 89. And that was SARS from 2003. We have copyrighted proof. He published this beforehand. And then on February 20th, I published information about that. And I published because we heard about the coronavirus, and I had been on a CBS TV news show in San Diego, January 23rd, and mentioned that, I've just heard about this coronavirus, and I want to tell people that Billy Meier had already published information about it. Well, it turns out that on the 25th officially of last year, I started to publish things that were being sent to me by Meier in Switzerland. And it has been, and we have well over 100, maybe close to 200 articles right now on my blog, without exception, error-free, never need of correction, retraction, revision, always the most specific, accurate information about this disease, always published before all official sources. I even put an online test where people can test what I'm saying through copyrights. And if they do that, they're going to have a big awakening. So here's what happened. I start publishing the information on the 25th, officially, let's say last year. There's 20, 50 cases, whatever, in the entire country. March 5th of last year, living in Arizona, I send out an email with documentation to the governor, to medical people, to media people, to educational people throughout the state, saying, look, this is what this is about. I've got probably 15 specific things about this disease that people need to know. And it turns out we're the first people to publish that it's a pandemic. We beat the WHO and the CDC. That it's
well, I don't feel like that was that. No.
Yeah. Actually, they published it even before we found out that he was told this on November, I think 19th or 15th, 30th of 2019. They told him this is a pandemic. Here it is. Asymptomatic spreaders. Children will be the main hidden spreaders. They'll initially be immune, then they will succumb to this. It will be spread airborne through surfaces and foods. We have it all. Copyright proof. We publish this. So I send it throughout Arizona. I get no responses. I keep sending emails. I send it to the city council here. I target one newspaper that's kind of prominent in this area. None of the reporters will report. They won't respond to me. They won't investigate. They won't even say it's a hoax. Why? Because this is suppressed. If people knew then, if this dinky little newspaper in Arizona had gone ahead and said, we're investigating claims by a science researcher in Flagstaff, Arizona, who's published information from his Swiss sources, had they published that, it would have gone up the news chain, AP, we would have had a chance to get this out. I'll just say something because I looked at my phone right before we started. There's a doctor I know in New York City who last April gave an interview with Al Jazeera about this information without mentioning where it came from, because he's a frontlines doctor since the beginning of the pandemic. And he came forward and he said all the stuff he said in the interview, he says, my sources have said this, this, and this, and so far everything they published is true. Myers was warned that we should create quarantines, hermetically sealed in all medical facilities, because this was being carried in and out of all medical facilities by workers there and spread, because we didn't understand that this was, the symptoms on this aren't just 2 weeks. They can go up to 4 weeks, up to 3 months. That finally got, everything's been corroborated. So here's what the guy wrote me yesterday. He was talking here about Fauci. This is from this doctor in New York. I'm not going to name him so he doesn't get into trouble. Fauci is ranting about how everyone needs to get vaccinated ASAP. The Playaran and Billy Meyer made mention that the ones in the US saying that the virus has pure animal origin know part of the story, if not the full story. He has to know something about this, meaning Fauci. It's sad because they really think these vaccines are effective and going to force people, they're going to force people to take it. Who are they going to blame when it doesn't work? And now you've injected all these people with experimental gene therapy. Okay, we might get in trouble for that, but here's the deal, folks. This information, Meyer, as far back as April of last year, said, unless there is a complete 3 to 5 month lockdown, yeah, sorry, you got to mask up, stay home, don't travel, stay out of public places. If we don't do this, we don't understand. The Wuhan information, Meyer published it in, again, November of 2019. We know this was brought to China by an American in the 70s. When you get the real genesis of this, and it's not been developed by the Chinese government, it's been developed in secret labs there. The detailed information on this, they warned and warned. If you do not follow these recommendations, which some people now are, publicly calling for, listen, do that, because otherwise, up to 500 million people eventually die of this disease. And as far back as December of last year, they're saying the public is going to be used as guinea pigs for untried and untested experimental vaccines. Tens of thousands of people will die or be sick. I'm not a fearmonger, and I'm not telling, this is not medical advice. This is information that we have from Switzerland, from the most impeccably accurate source on the planet, which is why you do not know about it until now. And which is why this man is targeted for death over and over and over again, because this now is an industry, it's a business. Whether or not there's a Bill Gates, Fauci conspiracy, we're not involved with that. As far back as 4 years ago, and it's also on my website from February 20th last year, the information from Meyer and the Playaran, there will be genetically engineered diseases that are used to try to exterminate peoples by the elites. And again, we're not a big cabal conspiracy people. We just said, see, the core of our problems, and this won't sit well with a lot of people, but I'll shoot it out there. We are vastly overpopulated because we've been irresponsible stewards of our world. We don't understand the finite nature of a ball on which we all live and how it really works. So we keep on going forth and multiplying, a crazy thing that nobody ever thought, is there any point in which we stop the multiplication for the sake of our survival? And these people have said, please do it yourself. Just stop for a while, because otherwise the elite, the people that do control the highest levels of finance and military, they're going to do it to you, because they recognize that reality in a very pragmatic way. It's not about the Georgia Guidestones. It's not about every conspiracy. It's about, if you can't guess already that the environment is rebelling everywhere. All the fires in America, Meyer specifically foretold decades ago. There's 74 wildfires as of the other day burning in America. Meyer published it. America, wildfires will burn. America will burn. The floods, the rains. So these are not aliens. They're not little weird creatures. These are people, in many cases, ancestrally connected to us, who are sitting and watching things unfold according to the immutable law of cause and effect, which we have been actually dismissive of. No, believe this and believe that and listen to this expert. These doctors that are on Twitter that don't know what they're talking about, really, all of the people that have taken a proactive position to try to get this information out were censored and suppressed or ridiculed or ignored. Okay, so here's what I did. One last thing on this, unless you want to say more. Last September, I put together a basic new online COVID test. I added to it recently because of new things. Here's a topic: pandemic, children, vaccines, infants. Now we have 29 topics. And what is it? I published, here's when Billy Meyer verified we published it, and here's the earliest I could find of official publication. Maybe you can find something earlier, but I couldn't. In some cases, it's only a week. In other cases, it's over a year. So every case that I could find, we prove to a legal standard. People understand copyrights, internationally respected legal standard proof of first publication. It doesn't mean what's published is true. It means it's published first. It just so happens that we published it first and it's true. Now, it's up to you. If you want to check out this information, we're not here trying to tell you what you should do with your body. We're simply saying, here's the information. Here's the people that have warned about it verifiably for a very long time. And everything so far that we can find, they've said, our medical people didn't know, and there's more that they don't know about this disease. So when I said earlier, it's about our key to our future survival. It goes back a very long time. And some of these things were foretold by the prophets of the past. They referred to them, these epidemics, as the rampantly spreading diseases of these new times. Forget UFOs, forget extraterrestrials if you want. The key to our future survival, learning to think, seeing how this, we asked in a film, by the way, I'll give a free film away. We filmed in 2006 and 7, put it out in 2008. It's called The Silent Revolution of Truth. Plenty of Billy Meyer. And then we asked him in the beginning about something. He says, the meaning of life is the evolution of consciousness. That says a lot. So I don't know if you have questions, challenges, comments, anything. I'm open to all of it. And, you know, we can, believe me, we can do hours on this case, but I want to know what you guys want to know.
Yeah, we could definitely do hours. I definitely am a big fan of people thinking for themselves and making their own, you know, making up their own mind. I mean, it's so uncertain, you know, right now. There's just so many different conflicting informations out there. I 100% am advocate for human freedom and sovereignty. On the overpopulation thing, that's something that's never sat well with me. I've driven across Texas. It's huge. Are there too many people in New York City? Oh, hell yeah. I just drove up the Eastern Seaboard and I was like, okay, maybe we do need to get rid of a few people. But like, I feel like that is a justification for treating some people differently than other people. Like, only, in my opinion, should God or the universe decide what lives and what dies. I don't think that that is up to any other, you know, being, you know, as far as sovereignty.
Sure. No, I would agree with that. The problem, see, what this is saying to us is this: nature. If we would observe nature and how it works, we would see creation in everything and everybody. We see in nature, for the most part, that creatures don't overpopulate an area, because if something like that starts to happen, nature then comes in and rebalances. Another species culls that species, or it imbalances its food support. We don't understand the actual amount of arable land. We are doing agriculture from the beginning all wrong. We have denatured soils everywhere. We have polluted, parts of the oceans are dead. So when we get, in the Meyer case, there's scientific information, we go, oh my gosh, how come we don't know that? Well, because everybody has an agenda. They're saying, don't kill yourselves. Don't allow eugenics and this and that. Restrain your births through birth control. Allow natural attrition so that you create breathing space for yourselves, and people are not having to live piled on top of each other, which creates strife, whether it's in a city or a suburb that keeps on growing and growing. I mean, they're doing it where we live here. We have to find out what the reality is, because they're saying, look, there are natural laws that provide the cycle of food, production, how your planet disposes of natural waste, let alone all the artificially created chemicals, which are now in everything, including your organic food. People don't understand the clouds carry the rain, carry the chemicals from the chemicalized soils, and what there is no sanctuary where you can say, well, I'm a vegan. And no, we're all in it together.
Yeah, I did that for a while too. I mean, yeah, you're a vegan, you're not eating meat, but you're still eating poison. So I get it. Yeah, I mean, we're in a mess. There's no doubt about that. I don't think anybody can dispute that fact, alone. All the stuff, all the chemicals, all the mix, and I feel like it's just going to backfire on everybody. Not like maybe it's meant to, be targeted as certain people or the general public or whatever, but we'll all suffer as a result of it.
Everybody is, exposed to this, and none of us are immune. And look, this is a discussion. It really, I know I'm speaking about stuff. It isn't meant as a lecture. Every month, there are groups now doing Zoom meetings around the world. We have a Zoom that we started in Arizona. We have people in India and Asia and South America, because people want to discuss and study, not be dictated to, not be, well, you must, because Billy Meyer said, or some, no, you've got a reason. Well, how can we learn what the truth is? This is how you learn to think. First of all, we must not only be self-responsible, we have to see things as they are. What is reality? Not all these filters of agendas that people have. I do my work voluntarily without compensation for doing it. I mean, if somebody buys my film or a book, great, thank you. I can keep going, but I made a contract with Meyer 17, 18 years ago. I will do this for free because I know this is truthful. And I'll do two things. I'll present your information the way you want it, the way you publish it, as long as I'm free to say, according to the information in the case, because I can't prove or disprove this, and if I disagree. And I've done on both of those. I was time to say, I can't agree with that. I don't understand how it can be true. I might trust that Meyer will prove true, but right now I'm struggling with my own thinking about a given thing. And if we don't do that for ourselves, we will be dictated to, we will be abused further. Meyer has already said there's a coming global financial crash. He told me in 2006, I put up the video about it, and it's only proceeding. We have the warnings, and I have the film out on, Amazon Prime. And did they listen? The people were warned. All the things they warned about, the coming civil wars. Oh, people laughed. I laughed in 86 when I'm reading 81, Billy Meyer's Two Coming Civil War. Said to my friend, I said, what's this guy talking about, America? Civil wars? I'm not laughing. The polarization is underway. People think, oh, how come there's no people out there with blue uniforms and gray uniforms? It's all underway. January 6th, Meyer basically foretold that in 2017. I mean, people, what does it take for us to do our due diligence? You can't join anything here as a cult. There's no cult. Can you study? Can you participate? Yeah, sure. But no, you're not under anybody's dictum here.
Well, and you can psychologically decide if you don't take a side, there are no sides. It's as simple as that. And that's what I think we need to do. I want to unite as many people as possible. I think now is the time. If you have a different opinion, that's okay. If you see the world differently than me, I'm going to get over it. I'm going to be all right. And most people, honestly, it took me a long time to be able to do that, frankly. Like I was ruining Thanksgiving dinner, smashing the stuffing and ruining people's holiday. And that's not doing any real good, right? So no matter what people decide to do with their bodies, with their lives, that is really up to them, as long as they're not, hurting anybody else and believe in self-defense. But, I think sovereignty, thinking for ourselves, and really just going deep. My friend Janine says to listen to the internet, the INNER. I love that. And really just shifting our focus to that, like intuitively, and perceptively, based on the information, because there's just so much information. There's misinformation, there's disinformation, all these informations. But I know for a fact that we're all connected to the same thing. So I really like the idea of the spiritual creation teaching, and people can find that as well on your website, on your blog.
Yes. Yes. And we have a lot of free information in Meyer's books. Meyer's written over 60 books. I mean,
God, man.
and amazing, man, amazing. There's something called neutral positive thinking, and the way it brings it up, because that ability to come to neutrality from that place, we consciously decide if we will perpetuate certain thoughts and feelings and actions, if we will modify, change them, no longer do them. So neutrality does not mean we don't have opinions. And especially, I was just reading something today from years ago, where he said, no, when there are terrible things in the world, when terrorism and wars and all these, you are required to speak up. It doesn't mean you're violating neutrality. Just do not become involved with partisan political agendas and manipulative things that are always producing conflict. Politics is not the art of the possible. It makes people stupid. It makes them more adversarial. It creates the problem. Then it says it'll solve it. 4 years later, it says there's a problem. Of course, it was created, and now we're going to solve. We have to get out of that dead end thinking and feeling that we're going to, well, Biden's doing wonderful things. Oh, Trump's, forget it. Sovereignty first, because when we finally are able to get any so-called leaders that can reflect the consciousness and will of good people, we're still a far way from that, whatever, but do the best we can.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. I think, it really comes down to thinking above that type of, it's hermetics, right? Like if we can go up, then we're not being swung back and forth on that wave. You can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. So we have to shift upward and have some perspective and be more objective as we look at things. And that allows, I think, everybody their own, like first and foremost, right? Like we understand sovereignty and that you're allowed to have your perspective and your point of view, and we can come together and we don't have to fight. That's really what's being incited. That's the thing that I want to see if we can't avoid, because everybody's going to have different perspectives, beliefs about reality. That's okay. That's got to be allowed. And I think that's got to be encouraged, because this is how we find great truths. This is how we make discoveries. If it wasn't continuing to ask questions and, filter through things, different solutions, and continuing to improve, then we wouldn't develop at all. So as far as like the evolution of consciousness, I think that fits right in with that idea, as well as like the law of one kind of teachings and several other sort of spiritual books that are similar to that I don't know, maybe the aliens or interdimensional deities or spirits, or I don't even know. But
when you read the Meyer material, you start to see the lacking. Look, it's better that we seek to find that unity and truth. And what's different here too is the nature of opposition is not denied. We need to rough and tumble without malice, without aggression towards each other. Disagreements, I was very surprised when I first went to Switzerland and I saw the people that work with Meyer. There's a group of people, Meyer has one vote, they all have one vote, and they can get into it with each other. Meyer can be overridden because there's no guruism and there's no malice and aggression towards each other. We are so aggressive. People can stand very firmly for things that oppose, as long as we understand we're searching for the same thing, and we don't oppose as an excuse. We don't use aggression and violence. We know that we're willing to go through the rough and tumble to get to the place of seeing the other perspective and finding truth, the truth about how things work in real life. So as I say, I want to give away a film to any of your viewers, listeners, audience. And it's a good overview of this case for people. And then we have just tons of free stuff to read. There's a beautiful thing called the Introduction to the Spiritual Teaching that one of the female contactees of Meyer spoke to him, and then it's transcribed, and it talks about the eternal human spirit that never sleeps at any time, and how it's so different than the indoctrination of being under the thumb of deities and beliefs and fears. So anybody that's interested, we'd love to share. I answer all my email, it takes a little while. And and be free, and find the truth. And yeah, for the sake of our survival and our unity, our oneness as human beings.
I love
on the planet.
That's great. I love it right there. We'll wrap right there. Yeah. So love each other. Love is ultimately what we're here to experience, understand, process, and share. So, I mean, no matter what we're never going to agree on everything anyway. So let's learn how to disagree. Let's learn how to think for ourselves. Let's keep exploring these topics. I would love to have you back and talk a little bit more about some of the areas that we didn't get to touch on, because I know it's a lot. But you can check out all this work at theyfly.com. And I also have the YouTube link. I have Michael's YouTube link in the show notes. So go check it out, subscribe to the channel. There's a bunch of stuff on there. And and all the information's there, I believe. Anything else?
Yeah, I would just say that my most active site is theyflyblog.com.
Okay.
People can actually participate, and we have 1,300 articles. Website's fine, there's a shop there. But again, I'll show people where they can get introduced to all this, the free info. That's really important for discerning how you feel about the material, what you think of it. And if you email me, mention Bootsy, mention this show, I'll send you a free film, no strings attached.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for that. I want to watch that, and I'll put the theyflyblog.com as well in the show notes, so people can go directly to that. And man, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate your time, your all your work. It's quite a catalog you have there. And yeah, we'll be in touch, my friend. I really appreciate it, and have a wonderful day out there in sunny Arizona.